Okay, very pleased today to welcome John Lombard, the CEO of NTT Data Asia Pacific. A long-time friend of mine now, and very pleased that you can give us the time to come and have a chat with us today. So,
Yeah, you're very welcome.
how did you end up in a role like that, first of all?
Wow, this is a long story, Bill. So
Well, we're good.
we've got some time.
We do.
Well, look, my career, I describe it as a marathon, not a sprint, is the best way to describe it. So actually, it started when I was finishing high school. My parents wanted me to be either a doctor or a dentist. Believe it or not.
Do you have Asian parents by any chance?
I had a tiger mum.
Yeah.
But no, I just didn't have the desire to do that. And I remember speaking to my sister at the time, and she was studying to be a chemist. So she'd sort of, followed that line. But I'd asked Dan, I said, look, is there any advice you can give me? She said, why don't you consider going into IT? It was called IT at the time, not tech.
Yeah.
That's how old I am.
Yeah.
And which I did. And one of the things I said to her at the time is, I'm not sure about that industry. It's full of a lot of nerds. And she said to me,
It still is.
she said, exactly. That's why you'd be good for it. So
Okay.
I made the decision a long time ago to get involved in the industry, and it's been a long journey through different paths. Working for a bank as a programmer, management consulting. We can talk about, maybe we'll get into a stint as a public company CEO.
But hang on, you started programming.
Yeah.
Which everybody calls coding nowadays.
Coding.
I started programming as well. So
Okay.
is that an avenue you think is useful to get into tech, or is that something that was useful to get into?
I still think it's useful. I know that there's maybe a bit of a mindset today that, you can just go into something and immediately become the boss. I really think it's important to have that base capability and skill. I mean, and the audience will never have heard of it. You probably have. I was a COBOL DB2 Kicks programmer at the National.
Very similar.
At the National Australia Bank. And I did 5 years of hardcore programming. Now, I wasn't very good, but I did it, and it taught me skills, capabilities around process, discipline, structure that actually still serve, I think, equally today, whether you call it programming, coding, DevOps, whatever it is. I think that base skill is really important.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. So you started with the tech side.
Started with tech side early on in my career, my early 20s. Then I moved I realized I was probably better at the linking business to IT or business to tech. So I got into management consulting, actually with PwC.
Cool.
Back in Australia. So, and then I had my first overseas project in 1996. And then that was in Thailand for a few months, and then spent about a year and a half in Indonesia, right up until, if you remember what happened in 1998.
Yeah.
The
Few challenges.
Reformasi at the time in Indonesia. So we went through the whole evacuation piece and everything, but just an amazing experience early on in my career to have that opportunity to work in a country that was really still, very much a developing economy.
Questions around that. The surprising number of people that are leading tech companies have gone through that management consulting route, whichever way you want to call it.
Yep.
What do you recommend that for people that were coming into the industry as a good avenue?
I think, look, it depends on the sort of person you are, the personality. I think if you're a deep technology person, I think there's many other options for you. For me, the person I am is I found it really important to be able to really map, a business requirement or a business need to technology. And even, back in those days, it was the same. Today, it's exactly the same for me. So look, I do think the good thing about working in any consulting firm or any management consulting business is you're not just working in one particular discipline or industry.
Yeah.
You tend to get an opportunity to work across different organizations.
You really learn to communicate as well. I've noticed anybody that's had ex management consultant background, they're always great communicators.
Because what happens is you get thrust into these environments where you walk into a meeting and people, because of what's on your business card, people assume you've got all of this depth and experience.
Expectations are high, right?
Very high. So I learned very quickly, it was PwC in my early career, and then it was KPMG Consulting. I learned very quickly that if you walk into a meeting with that on your your title, people had a very high set of expectations.
The other point that you mentioned was you started moving into international projects. I left the UK
Very early.
in 1981 because I really wanted to get into international. I wanted to have experiences
during your high school years.
Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you, Joe. But it's do you recommend international as a way forward as well for people building careers in the tech industry?
Look, I guess the audience know my answer before I say it. 100%. I mean, for me as an Australian in my mid-20s, to have the opportunity to get exposed to a completely different culture, a different way of doing business. You spend your whole life in one particular location or industry, and then that's what you know, and that's what you feel comfortable in. It really puts you in situations that are uncomfortable at times, but it certainly for me was something that really helped me develop my career. And again, it's not just because that's what I did or maybe what you did, Bill. It doesn't mean that's what everybody.
It's not the only path, right?
It's not the only path. I've got lots of friends of mine back in Oz who stayed in Australia and had fantastic careers. But for me, it was definitely an important part of my development.
I've seen, I was challenged in a previous episode by one of our guests, but I've seen that the direction to the top of organizations is often through finance or through sales. The challenge I had was, no, nowadays you can go through technology as well, which I take. But in your view?
I don't have look, I think it's horses for courses. I've seen some of the best leaders have been coming from pure technology, pure finance, sales. I don't think it's one size fits all. I look at my experience later on in my career. I spent a decade at SAP, the software company, and that company globally had CEOs who'd come from sales, who'd come from development, really different backgrounds.
So there truly are many avenues to the top.
I think so. I don't think it's one size fits all. Yeah.
But on the personal leadership style, you mentioned you're an Australian.
Don't hold that against
Never would have guessed, mate. And you're now running a team across how many countries?
14 countries in Asia Pacific.
14 countries.
Yeah.
How does your leadership style change across those 14 countries, or do you make the 14 countries adapt to your style?
Yes. So there's two parts to that answer. One is the experience that I've had, and two, based on that experience, what I've done during my time with both Dimension Data, NTT, and now NTT Data. So the experience I had was in my first years coming into Asia, I'd see a lot of expats running different parts of the Asia Pacific region. So there's often a mentality that, you can apply one type of leadership uniformly across Asia Pacific. And what I quickly learned is actually it's not that it always fails, but it doesn't always work. You're far better off, and my belief is you need locals running local businesses predominantly. And it's not to suggest...
100% agree with that.
It's not to suggest that you can't, in some instances, have expats coming in. I mean, I'm an Australian based here in Singapore, running an Asia-Pacific business, etc. But I mean in the countries. So that to me is really important. And that can be hard at times to find the right people with the right capabilities in all of those 14 countries. But I really think that's been one of the keys to the success of our business.
So for our listeners that's outside of the Asia-Pacific region, we can talk about the United States, and we can argue for a while whether it's united at the moment or not.
I never talk politics.
We can talk about Europe to a certain degree, even though my country decided to take a path of Brexit. But is there an Asia-Pacific?
No. So, and I know this might surprise some people for me to respond that way. And clearly we are geographically recognized as Asia-Pacific. And there are certain traits that sort of unite this region, I guess, in different ways in other parts of the world. But what's really important to recognize is Asia-Pacific is a collection of 14 different countries and languages and cultures that in the most part are very different. And the mistake a lot of people make who are coming from outside of the region or haven't had experience here is painting a sort of a one-size-fits-all approach across the way business is done here. So you'll tend to get this, in Asia Pac, this is how it works. Well, actually, it works very different in Vietnam than it does in Indonesia. It's very different in India than it is to New Zealand. Australia is very, very different again to China or Taiwan. So it really is important to reckon. And I've, again, through experience, learned to understand there are real differences that mean that you've got to be very mindful to that in the way you set up and run these businesses. It doesn't mean that you from a compliance point of view, from an ethics point of view, you make compromise. But it does mean that in the way you communicate, in the way you interact with employees, with clients, in our case, we call our clients customers, Bill.
Bit of history to that one.
We call our customers clients. Sorry, got that.
That's more like right.
Yeah, sorry. So it just means that you need to be mindful in the way you communicate and interact with some of those individuals.
Now, you slipped in earlier that you used to run a listed organization.
I did.
And
yep.
I've also run a publicly listed company. Could you just help, again, people listening to this understand the difference between running a listed company and running a division of a huge organization like NTT?
Yeah, so as you introduced me, so I'm the CEO of NTT Data here in Asia Pacific. I did have a period where I was working at SAP. I was based in Germany. 2 weeks before I was approached for this role that I'll quickly mention, my wife had said to me, "Is there anything that would get you to leave, this current role?" We were living in this picturesque little village in the middle of Germany.
Sweet.
We were having a walk on a Sunday, and we were literally going through a forest. And I said, the only thing I could imagine is being back in Australia, running a listed company in Australia, because I'm Australian, and that was just... Yeah. And literally 2 weeks later, I was approached out of nowhere to run
out of nowhere, just like that. Somebody heard your wish.
I don't know what happened, and they approached me to run this company that had nothing to do with technology, had nothing to do with IT, but I had been a very junior partner in KPMG Consulting. We were calling it managing director at the time, and for a short period before joining SAP. And they wanted somebody who understood the partnership culture, but also a company corporate sales culture.
Right.
So I'd been at KPMG, I'd been at SAP, and so it sort of was, on paper, the perfect fit. So yeah, to cut a long story short, I was the CEO of a company in Australia, publicly listed company called WHK Group. It's since been acquired. And the difference, to your question, is chalk and cheese.
It is night and day.
It is night.
It really is. Yes.
And I'll almost say, and hopefully I'm not offending. Well, I'm in this situation myself at the moment. I hope I'm not offending people listening. If you haven't been the CEO of a publicly listed company, you have not been a CEO.
Correct. 100% agree.
So it's the shareholder focus, the analyst focus, the media attention, and we were a big organization. It was a mid-sized company on the Australian Stock Exchange, but unless you've been through that,
there's nothing like getting your scorecard read every 90 days by the public.
Correct. And read back to you. And John, you said this 3 months ago. So tell us how that's tracking.
It's a lot of personal risk and exposure, but to me, it's the ultimate. It's the most exciting point in my career. I loved it, and
it was a tough experience. Without going through all the detail, this was a partnership sort of group of partnerships that have moved into a corporate culture. And I've learned now you can't sort of have partnerships in a listed environment. I think that I challenge anyone to show me where that's really worked at scale and successfully. But what I learned through that and dealing with different stakeholders, and even I had an experience where I had to front a parliamentary inquiry.
Oh, I remember this story. That sounded incredibly stressful.
And look, the day I did it, I was in one room, and at the time, the CEO of Qantas, Alan Joyce, had shut the airlines down for what I won't go into the reasons. He was in another room, and I was just grateful that he was in the other room because all of the attention was on him and not me. So, but it was just look, I look back on that similar to you as one of the greatest experiences from a personal learning and development perspective. Yeah.
It's not the easiest either. Now a lot of my work is advising early stage tech companies, and a lot of those CEOs aspire to do this. It's always, are you sure?
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unless you've been through it. And even, going onto boards, and a lot of people say, as they get later on in their career, look, maybe what I'll do is, when I finish up, I'm going to do a few board roles.
Non-exec, and
I'll just, float around the board scene. Be careful what you wish for. Yeah. I mean, I know you are, I'm on different boards. I mean, this is not a walk in the park. You are personally liable. You need to do your reading. It's a huge responsibility to be on a board. And, I just urge people to consider that.
So there's one question I have to ask. Sorry. Sure. An Australian in Germany, who has the better beer? Australia or Germany?
Germany.
Okay.
Yeah. No, look,
it's on the record.
I don't want to spend too long on that, but look, I'm a proud Aussie, Bill, as you probably know.
No.
We have some wonderful things and great beer, but the German beer, the local beer, is just wonderful.
So how one of the challenges I had in the end of my corporate world was I just traveled so much. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Particularly in a global role. How do you manage balance between your family commitments, your husband, your dad, you're also a leader of a huge team. How do you balance those? 'Cause it's not easy.
Yeah, that is. And that's a question I get a lot internally from, when I talk to staff and, have conversations with different people, I get that a lot. It's, for me, I mentioned marathon and sprint. That's sort of a bit of a tagline for me. I really believe that your career is a marathon, not a sprint. I've worked with and I'm sure I know you're the same, work with so many people early on in your career or in my career that have sort of shone bright and then they're just burnt out.
Yeah.
So for me, it's important to take the time, like physical exercise for me is really important, whether it's running or gym. After this, I'm off to my trainer.
Yeah, you're a fitness nut.
I don't know about nut, but the guy that trains me is like, Mr. Singapore, bodybuilder, plug there for Adrian. But no, fitness is really important, and just taking the time, like managing the schedule really well and putting time in for all of the things that you talked about, family, friends. I love to go on hikes. I love to go camping. I travel a lot for work. So wherever I travel, I make sure I'm exercising as well.
And with the COVID impact that we had, and we're all locked down, and I can remember doing calls 24 hours a day because you've got nowhere to go and we're in a global operation, so you might as well hop on the call. After COVID, has that remained as part of the culture in the organization, or have you managed to calm it down a little bit?
So I did 10 weeks of quarantine during COVID. So
I remember you were struggling with it.
Yeah, that was a bit rough. I worked out that I can spend 10 weeks in solitary confinement, so I'm not sure. Hopefully I'll never get to use that in the future. But no, look, I'm a believer, and absolutely the working from home bit has a place in work and in organizations. I am a believer that we are far more effective just as people when we come together. I don't like people working long-term at home. It's not from a business point of view. It's actually from a mental health perspective. It's just proven. I mean, you can feel it when you're surrounded by people in the office. The electricity and the energy.
I miss it.
Right. I mean,
I do miss it.
So I'm encouraging people to come back into the office. And look, we're 14 countries. You asked me the question before about Asia. Is there an Asia? We're completely different across those 14 countries. In some countries, in some markets, everybody's back in the office. We haven't had to ask them. They just want to be back in. In others, people it's harder to get people to come back in. So we are looking at ways of encouraging people without sort of forcing that conversation.
Because the internet part of it is part of the portfolio of NTT is the communications capability, visual communications, audio, everything combined, all these wonderful new tools. And is that changing literally the way people work now that they are staying at home more post-COVID? Or do you find it's from your client's point of view?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, all of that technology, and that's exactly the technology that we're involved in. All of that network infrastructure, communications, helping corporates connect and be secure while they connect, and all of the collaboration technology that they need to do that. That's part of what we do. And that, of course, when we were, during COVID, that part of our business obviously accelerated a lot. And that's just a normal part of how business will happen. There will always be an environment where people will want to work in different places, remotely, at home, etc. And I think that's here to stay. I don't think that's going to change.
So when I talk about my previous history with NTT, people always say, the Japanese telco. You're so much more than that, right?
Yeah. The way I describe it, and because, again, apologies for the non-Australians listening around the world, but the telco company in Australia is called Telstra. I say the business in Japan is sort of the Japanese Telstra, but no, NTT in Japan is a number of companies, telecommunication companies, also communication companies, massive data center presence in Japan. Everything outside of Japan is being put under a single brand now, as of the 1st of April this year, called NTT Data. And that is the business that covers all what we call sort of IT infrastructure business. So for the non-technical people listening to this, to our conversation, if you go into any sort of bank or in any environment or interact with a government, financial services company, a retailer, if you're involved in manufacturing at all, and you think about all of the networking required to support those sorts of business, the network infrastructure, a lot of this stuff people just take for granted, Bill, that just happens. So all of that network infrastructure, all of the security that's required around that network infrastructure, all of the data centers that that are needed to support those computing environments, all of the collaboration technology, the visual communication technology that's needed for that, and then all of the cloud services that are required as well. We manage all of that. We do all of that. So
a lot of people don't know that. When they think of NTT, they think of Docomo, they think of mobile phones, they think of consumers, and all this enterprise stuff.
That's not us outside of Japan. We're a systems integration company, technology services company. So if you think of us, companies or organizations like Accenture, for example, what IBM used to be before they split, that's what we're becoming. So both technology infrastructure, but also application. So, we're a big SAP partner, for example. We do a lot of stuff with Microsoft, with AWS, with Google Cloud here in Asia Pacific. We do a lot of work with companies like ServiceNow, SuccessFactors, etc. So these are all organizations that we work a lot with.
So one of the hottest things this year has been the growth in the Nvidia stock, because of AI and because of this explosion of servers required. Your data center footprint, as I remember, was over 160 data centers around the world.
It's growing all the time. There's enormous investment going into our data centers. I think in Asia Pac alone, we're and because there's so many new data centers coming online, but we're either number 2 or number 3 just in Asia Pacific.
And the amount of data center requirements footprint going to continue?
Absolutely. I mean, the growth of, with all of this expansion of technology and expansion in terms of the need, people consuming all of these apps and applications for personal use. But then you just think about all of the explosion of the, what we call IoT, or the Internet of Things. So the fact that pretty much everything now is connected to a network somewhere, if you think of it that way, whether it's a car, whether it's your watch, or a device in a home. I've just had a renovation done to a house, and everything, all of the sprinklers are connected to our network.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to make them work, by the way. But so that explosion of all of that networking and technology is just driving demand for these computing platforms that sit in the cloud, that sit in these data centers. Then you add to that what you said, Bill, which is now going to be this exponential growth in generative AI and AI type technologies, and these people are referring to them as large language models or MLMs. I've heard that term, medium language models, etc. So all of this explosion in the use of this technology is driving demand for what we call compute or computing power. And it just so happens that data centers, of course, are the best place to put this.
So there's a whole bunch of questions around this. First of all, on AI, it's real then. It's not just hype.
It's real. It's real. I would just say, and again, I don't want to be quoted as, John Lombard said that there was no future for AI, because absolutely this is real and it's tangible. A lot of what we're seeing at the moment is still very much prototype, proof of concept work. So I was speaking to one of the large hyperscalers, and I won't name which one, and what I got back from that conversation was there's a lot of activity, but it's all POC work, proof of concept. Now, I believe that what we're seeing at the moment is, I don't know if you've heard of Amara's law.
Yeah.
So this concept of we tend to...
But only today.
Good. So, this concept of we tend to overhype in the very short term the impacts of technology, but then we underestimate it because maybe it doesn't exactly live up to what we expect in the first year. We underestimate the impact in the medium term. And I think maybe this could be what we're seeing with Gen AI. So we're going to see lots of excitement early on, and then you might have some people say, there's been lots of excitement, but are people really getting the value? But I absolutely believe this will be massively game-changing.
So a question I asked a previous guest, it'd be interesting to see, is this another internet moment, or is this just another tool in the toolbox?
No, this is absolutely an internet moment.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bigger moment. I think it's not a technology moment. I think it's a massive life-changing moment, transformative moment. This is we discovered electricity moment.
So what does this do for skill sets? Talent shortage in the tech industry is well communicated, well talked about, particularly in cybersecurity.
Yep.
How does this impact your business and enable your growth? Do you find any challenges on attracting, retaining talent in this part of the world that may be unique to Asia Pacific compared to the rest of the world?
I think, what's unique to Asia Pacific is we've got 14 countries. So we need to service our clients in 14 locations, and each of those locations vary greatly with their education systems, with the numbers of available talent in those markets, etc. And some have a real focus on investing in technology type, training and skills, and others not so much. So that means that we have to be very mindful at a country level how we invest. I mean, I think one of the things that's really good about what we do, if I can just get a plug in for NTT Data, Bill, is that we offer a lot of what we call managed services. So if you think about cybersecurity, for example, or cloud computing, and you can imagine that it's really hard for a lot of companies to keep up with the skills that they need in a particular technology. So what we're doing is, by having an ability to have these managed services, organizations don't always have to invest in those skills themselves. They can actually outsource it to a company like us, and then they can free up their internal talent to do other things, or things that are very specific to their company. So actually, that's why companies like ours, we're seeing the growth that we're seeing, because organizations are having some of these challenges with skills and capability. But if I can answer the other part of that question that was inherent, I think, in what you said was, what does it mean for people coming into the market? Well, I've got 3 kids. My oldest son's doing a cybersecurity degree.
Awesome.
My eldest daughter is doing early childhood development, and my youngest daughter's sort of talking at this stage about doing psychology. And part of the conversation, honestly, I'm having with them is, you got to think 20 years out. And with AI, what will the impact be?
Absolutely.
Now, we also know, because everyone said, with the internet and with technology, everyone's job's going to go and it's going to be terrible.
That's always the first reaction to every new technology wave, right?
And we know that what happens is new roles will emerge that we haven't even heard of sitting here today.
100%.
And it's already happening now. So I'm not as negative on that as maybe other people are. Look, definitely roles today will not exist in the future because of AI.
So what are the hot roles that you would be looking to hire into NTT right now? Because if you're saying that clients no longer need to have the pressure of having these resources available because you could provide them for them and the services on the back of it. You still need those people in your organization
absolutely
to deliver it. So
Yeah.
What's the type of talent that you are struggling to get or able to get? Is there any sort of sense as to...
Look, there is absolutely a talent war at the moment, and certainly in Asia Pacific. So that's very clear. Good talent should always be hard to find. So if you think about it, I mean, if they're good, they're going to be hard to get. So good talent should be hard to find. And we should always challenge ourselves, and we do, on making sure that we get the very best. Certainly skills are important. I look at people who are curious and actually people that have got really good EQ. I'm a big believer that I assume that if you're fronting up for an interview and you've been through some sort of degree and technology degree, that you can probably, you've got some level of intellect and you've got reasonable IQ. I sort of make that
table stakes, right?
Table stakes. For me, it's all about EQ. It's how you engage with that person. Are they curious? Do they engage well? Do you feel comfortable with them? So in our industry, it's vital that we have people that can communicate. Vital that we have people that can work well in a team environment. Really important that we have people that are really passionate about the industry and are self-learners. You don't have to tell them. They don't come to you and say, well, what's next in my career path? They're challenging. They're saying, here's what I'm doing and here's what I want to do. They're the sorts of people we want in our business.
Any particular technical skills that people going to university now or in university need to pick up along the way? And then I'll touch on the softer skills that goes with it.
Yeah. So look, I think, any of the DevOps type skills you asked earlier about, is it important to have those basic capabilities? Absolutely. They're saying there's about 3 million cybersecurity roles that are currently vacant globally at the moment. Look, cybersecurity, unfortunately, is going to be with us. That need's going to be with us and just growing.
Yeah.
I think an inherent in all of this will be AI and Gen AI and capability. I think that's important. Any sort of technical skill is still very important to have. And then, the soft skill on top is
and the soft skills, I 100% with you that I'd rather hire for attitude than ability. A lot of the ability can be trained, but the attitude can't.
Correct.
So is it still the traditional things like communication skills, written, verbal, or teamwork, collaboration?
It's sitting down with someone and then they don't have their mobile phone out in front of them, when they're talking to you.
I'm not in this part of the world.
I know it's actually a strange thing for me to say. I've experienced that. It's incredible. You'll be talking to someone and they'll sort of say, oh, excuse me for a minute, and they're flicking on their phone or in a client meeting, I've had people, pull out their phone. And I think it's just basic, looking people in the eye and communicating and giving them the respect. It's really as simple as that.
So if we just jumping back to the technology for a minute, we're matching skills to the environment right now where there's a talent war. It's not the first time, obviously, I've heard that. Year after year, there seems to be a talent shortage and competing for top talent. Is this something that the universities should focus on in the way that they change their training approach to make it more appropriate for organizations like NTT? Because I still think there's a mismatch between what universities produce and what companies like yours actually requires. Any feedback you'd like to give in that area?
Yeah, I think traditional universities still struggle. And look, to be very fair to them, I mean, they make enormous efforts to make sure that they are aligning their curriculum with the needs of industry. That's universities. But the problem is that by the time you've set your curriculum up, and then if you're thinking about a 4-year degree, that's a 7-year turnaround. 7 years ago, think about what we were talking about in our industry. It was sort of,
world of difference.
It was different, right? Okay, there's some similarities, but it was different. And now it's all Gen AI. It's all, So I think it's always going to be tough for the more traditional universities. I think there are organizations that are technical institutes that still offer degrees that are much closer to industry. We've been working with some of them, for example, in Australia. I'm not sure I should plug them here, but there are organizations that are very close to industry and understanding what's going on. So I think they're getting better, but they've got a tough job to try and to try and build curriculum and predict what their students are going to need to have in 4 or 7 or 10 years' time, it's always going to be tough.
So let's link those two together: the attitude, the universities, what they train, and then the Gen X, Gen Y, and so on.
Yeah.
I was quite surprised a few years ago when I was getting people coming into the organization who were encouraged by their lecturers, by their universities to bounce early on in their careers, not stay anywhere. And when I came out of university or came out of further education long years ago, it was always stay, get a job, grow inside the organization, don't bounce.
Yeah.
Where is it now in your view? Is it good to bounce, not to bounce? What will you be saying to your kids, for example?
So my view, and I think maybe it's because of my maturity in terms of my age, I'd say don't finish. I'm a believer in finish what you start. So I've got a strong belief in that. But I do know that, and I am familiar with, that trend in some circumstances. Jump out, maybe get industry experience, finish your degree off part-time. I understand that as well. Look, my view is, a degree in many ways, or a qualification, is a bit of a ticket. It certainly was in my time. It was a ticket to the dance. It was an entry into. Nothing beats industry experience. Nothing comes close to being in the workforce and actually at the forefront of what, your organization, if you're working for a company in a technology division, or what their clients are needing. If you're working for a
So now not hanging around, but meeting many founders of tech companies in this part of the world, they're often very proud about the culture they're creating, and it couldn't be more different. These things, if I go there and I'm dressed like this, I'm the only guy wearing long pants in the meeting, and it's, you bring the dog to work, and it's all this kind. Is this challenging traditional organizations, if I dare say, NTT, IBM, larger organizations, traditional, or are you getting impact from this type of culture shift?
So not challenging at all. I mean, I'm completely. When I started my career, I can remember at one of those management consulting firms I mentioned earlier, Bill. I won't name the one. I was I was a young person. I walked out of the office in Melbourne. I was wearing a suit, but I'd had my tie off because it was a 38-degree day.
There you go.
And one of the senior partners waved at me and said, "Lombard, we don't leave the office without our tie at firm XYZ." Today, of course, it's totally different. We've got we completely, as long as people are respecting the client environment that they're in, and and obviously appropriate, we're totally relaxed about that sort of stuff. And if you come to our office, Bill, you've been to our office. Well, we've got exercise bikes where people can work. We try and make, and you've got to make the work environment just as fun as your home environment. I mean, people have got to feel really relaxed at work and really comfortable. I really like what those early technology companies did. Going back 20 years, they introduced the pool tables and the
had an impact on all of us, hasn't it?
It really has had a positive impact. I think it's brought people closer together. I think it's making it easier for people to want to come back into the office. They don't have to worry about, I need to go and buy a suit because I put on weight during COVID. No, I think it's been fantastic for the industry. No issue.
It goes to extremes. I've seen people saying, I didn't join this company because I didn't like their restaurants. Not the food, but the restaurants, and I can't use the tools that I want to use, therefore I won't join this company.
Yeah.
Are you still seeing that, or is that
not as
been
much?
And gone?
Yeah, look, what happened is, we're sitting here and it's, early 2024. Certainly coming off the back of COVID, there was an explosion in movement, of, the Great Resignation, everyone just sort of leaving companies and getting these 40% increases, joining all these new tech companies that were coming into, certainly in Asia Pacific. I suspect, in fact, I know it was the same everywhere else in the world. And of course, what happened is those organizations realized that you can't just grow a business by just trying to take market share. And unfortunately, what we've seen is a lot of staff reductions over the last 6 months in this part of the world. So a lot of that, I'd call it extreme sort of behavior that we might have seen in the market, is certainly abating at the moment. It's a lot easier. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's a lot easier to get good talent in this region at the moment. So
now you've also got on the technology again. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but if we talk about the technology, and I'm just looking here, you've got this new thing you're bringing to market called the Innovative Optical and Wireless Network. What on earth is
ION? ION.
Yeah, what is
it? Rolls off the tongue. So ION is, so if you think about all of the network infrastructure we have in the world today, and all of the cabling and infrastructure that's required in a data center. I know a lot of the people listening probably haven't been in a data center, but actually, if you get the opportunity, I would highly encourage.
Oh, it's fascinating.
It really is.
Yeah.
You just see. This is where all of that stuff that I do on my phone, on my computer, actually gets processed, and the technology that's involved. But also, one of the big downfalls of these data centers is the energy usage, is the CO2 consumption.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up.
They are massive consumers of energy, and as a result, it's a big issue. And what I'm really proud of at NTT is we've come out and said that our data centers will be net neutral on CO2 emissions. Sorry, net zero by 2030.
Wow, that's
a massive ambition.
Yeah, no kidding.
If you think about it, right? So one of the technologies that our R&D, NTT's R&D organization in Japan, we spend over $3 billion a year on research and development, Bill.
I'm sure most people don't know that.
$3.3 billion. Yeah, we are a massive R&D and organization, and it goes back to this philosophy that the NTT overall group has, that it's really important that we create technology for good, and that we have a positive impact in the environment. And it's not just words. This is backed up by, in this case, literally billions of dollars of investment in things that are predominantly focused on the positive impact for the communities in which we work. So in this case, ION, as you've innovated the innovative optical wireless networking, is using photonic technology, so effectively light technology, but all the way through the network infrastructure and in the data center. It significantly reduces CO2 usage, energy usage. So you don't need as much energy to pump light through something than you do, electrons. It's way better when it comes to much lower latency, much better with bandwidth. So you can just do a lot more way quicker with less energy. Right? So it's a no-brainer technology. But it's called ION, so we're investing in that. Also, other things we're doing through that R&D is we're creating artificial photosynthesis to speed up CO2 absorption. So there's artificial photosynthesis technology, and we actually have a Gen AI platform called Suzumi that basically allows we can start to apply Gen AI large language models to different industry use cases. So this Suzumi, you'll hear, we'll be talking more about that, in the months to come.
Very cool.
The technology.
Well, good luck with the integration of all these companies and the new NTT Data. And again, as the CEO of NTT Data in Asia Pacific, I think they're in safe hands. And I'm very, very grateful that you could come in today and have a chat. And don't keep your trainer waiting.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, thanks for having me. Loved every minute of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.